Welcome to the FINK podcast. It isn't until it is.
In which we discuss the various moving parts in a life in music. I'm Finn.
I'm Tim.
I'm Guy.
Welcome back. This is episode 2 of season 5 of this new series, the FINK podcast. It isn't until it is. And this time we're going to talk about producers. And this is such a big topic that we're going to have a couple of episodes about this.
We are. It's a sprawling beast, this one, because we can't talk about everything we want to talk about and naturally will talk about in just one episode.
Yeah.
So we've spliced it in thrain. We've got 3.
That's
and
right.
The first one we're going to talk about when it comes to producers is like a bit of a history of what it is. What is it?
Yeah.
And what the producers do, and a little bit of a history of producers as we've experienced it, aren't we, basically?
Yeah, that's right.
Should we describe, for people that aren't necessarily totally entrenched in our business, what a producer is?
Yeah. Broadly speaking, a producer is the person responsible for putting the sound of the band on a record. So he's the key conduit. That can mean numerous things. So it could mean he is booking the studio, booking the engineer, talking to the band about what they want to do, that kind of role where he's a bit more kind of hands-off, but he's very much helming the project. Or it could mean that he's literally the guy twiddling the knobs.
Yeah, sometimes a producer is, as the title might suggest, almost like a coordinator, right? And other times the producer, because there's art involved, is another lens to float all the light through.
Yeah.
And it's a role that's changed a lot over the years.
Absolutely, yeah, as we'll discover. But I also wanted to just say a quick sidebar, which is that we will probably, in this conversation, use the pronoun he.
Probably a lot.
And
yeah.
I'm very, 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 very sorry about that.
Yeah.
One of the main reasons for that is because there simply aren't that many female producers. That's just a fact. There aren't as many as there are male producers.
Well, it's definitely getting better.
It's getting better.
Because it's one of those roles in life where it's like there's no physical attributes that mean men are better than women at this.
Definitely not.
So, but in the history of producing that we've got, there kind of really isn't any that we can talk about until like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So there's that.
There is that, but I just wanted to kind of say that up front. You know, with the likes of Catherine Marks, you know, it's now much more kind of like, yeah, she's a fucking cool producer, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, just wanted to get that in there real quick. Yeah. So let's talk about who was the first producer to cross your radar when you were a child?
Well, I want to say someone like George Martin from the Beatles, because he's the obvious white coat producer kind of thing. And we all saw pictures of the Beatles growing up. I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was either like Dr. Dre, because I was really into rap, or Scott LaRock with KRS-One.
Right.
I realised that the performer wasn't necessarily the person making the music they were performing on.
Yeah.
And that for me would have come from seeing Public Enemy had this guy Terminator X, and NWA had Dr. Dre, and Beastie Boys and Run DMC had Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin, yeah.
So I think I was kind of roughly made aware then that these rappers, they didn't make the beats, somebody else made the beats for them. That's probably my first moment.
Sure, yeah. What about you, Guy? Can you remember?
Well, the thing about me is, because of my upbringing, I was aware of producers and their roles from birth, essentially.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you know, so within the family, that, you know, my dad was always constantly seeking producers. And
did he have a sort of prevalent producer?
yeah, he went through. He'd have like a decade of being consistently with the same person, then the next decade consistently with the same other person. But for me personally, as in my own musical experience, I was aware of producers. Probably, I would say it would be metal. You know, as soon as I got into metal, so it was basically Slayer and Rick Rubin. I kind of knew how much influence producers had, but my own personal experience going, oh my God, someone's produced something here that's completely different to what I've heard before was Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
I would say there. But in hindsight, you kind of were aware of other guys in the background, in your periphery of your vision, but you only realise now I'm an adult that oh right, of course it was Steve Albini was really important in that record. I knew he did it, but it never occurred to me how important he was in the process. So personally, Rick Rubin, Slayer.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, Beastie Boys. That was the one.
He did
of course.
Beastie Boys as well.
Beastie
Yeah,
Boys.
That's right. I mean, George Martin, I've no idea when George Martin crossed my radar because I was always listening to the Beatles. But Quincy Jones might definitely have been a name because it was on Thriller.
Yeah, he's on Thriller, yeah.
So I remember
and his signature's on the record
exactly,
too.
yeah. So who's Quincy Jones? Oh, that guy. Okay, that's great. But I think maybe the truth may have come from an anomaly, which was that Adam and the Ants, who I was mega into.
Love them, yeah.
They were produced by a guy called Chris Hughes. And Chris Hughes, I found out, was actually one of the drummers. But in the band, he was called Merrick.
Right.
Marco, Merrick, Terry Lee, and so on. And he was Chris Hughes. And he produced... So I remember looking at that going, oh, hang on. Is that the same guy? And then I realised it was the same guy. He did produce it. And he went on to produce some monster albums. He produced songs from The Big Chair by Tears for Fears. But yeah, he produced all 3 Adam and the Ants albums. I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they're not easy records to I mean, from a producer's perspective, they're quite busy. So it's not easy to make.
Yeah. So he must have had a job on his hands as well.
No doubt.
Marshalling the whole...
Imagine trying to constrain that much character.
Yeah, for sure.
Both musically and visually.
Yeah.
Like, got to think of the whole
Malcolm
package.
McLaren had something to say in that, but that's for another episode, possibly.
Yeah.
So was he a producer?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, but a producer, as we said at the very beginning, some producers are the kind of I'm going to spool the tape myself and we're going and rig the mics personally type producers.
Yeah.
And other producers like Rick Rubin are the more kind of like, I don't know how any of this works. I just know that sounds good, so do that again type producers.
Yeah.
And I'd say Malcolm McLaren was definitely the latter. He definitely wasn't the kind of I'm going to learn something guy. He was the kind of like, I'm into pirates, I'm into Burundi beats. You know what would be good, Adam? If you were into pirates and you were into Burundi beats and I know a band I'm going to steal for you and then you go in the studio and get the record done and I'll see you later.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of like almost like an executive production role where you go, here's a good idea, why don't you do this?
Yeah.
And I think this is why a lot of producers, they don't, even though they have a lot of creative ideas and input into the music, they don't take publishing share. They take master share as part of their deal. They get cut into the records. That's why some producers are extraordinarily wealthy because they get a cut of U2 or Coldplay or whatever it is. But they generally don't take publishing, even though they have these really great creative ideas. They don't write the song; they just make the song sound so much better.
But then some do because they are also like the guy who sits down with the guitar and writes, like the guy who does Adele.
Paul Epworth.
Yeah, it's a bit like Paul Epworth, and also someone like Jack Antonoff, who always seems to take a writing credit, but you kind of think he probably literally is the guy sitting at the piano with the star as well.
Yeah,
I mean, slightly different.
Is he the kind of guy that goes, Taylor, that was a great idea. Let's do that. But I'm here, so I get a third.
Yeah, maybe.
Or is he the guy that goes, no, you know what? Maybe shake it off would be better than work it out. Why don't we try that? It's a massive topic for us.
Yes.
So why don't we start with a little potted history of where this role has come from?
Yeah.
Because the performer is an obvious choice. He's the guy that gets up and sings the song and etc. But the producer as a role only came into being when the concept of putting music on a format came into being.
That's right.
It didn't really...
Yeah.
Before that, it would have been very much the producer would have produced a show or something, like in film or something.
Yeah.
But the super early guys, talking like, early 20th century guys, they were very much the kind of archivist type roles. They would just be capturing sound.
Yeah.
People like the Lomax family Alan Lomax, where he would be traveling around the Deep South on behalf of American cultural institutions, kind of saving and archiving music that just exists in the air and isn't on record. Once these people have gone, the music has gone forever.
Yeah.
And so he would famously travel around the South with a car with a massive, like a really early kind of recording machine, which I actually wrote down what it was. It was called Presto Instantaneous Disc Recorder,
Amazing.
which would instantly press onto acetate, aluminium acetate, the sound.
Right.
So you'd kind of sing into the microphone or horn or whatever, and it would like cut it immediately onto the acetate. So then he could then play those the artists he was finding, the music, and the first time they would have ever heard their own music.
Of course, yeah.
And he famously discovered like Muddy Waters and Leadbelly and people like that doing this.
Right.
He would like
sure.
move in nearby, stay for a few days, persuade them, the people he was going to record, you have a precious jewel that we need to save. And when they were comfortable, he'd turn the rooms put curtains up and stuff like that. Do it like that. And without him doing that, there's a lot of amazing Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters. Some amazing music we wouldn't know about it.
Yeah.
And these guys, you know, there's no question that these early recordings influenced everything that happened next because everybody that was their only reference to what happened next. So if you want to go really, really far back, like outside of the studio, and I learned this there's a museum in Paris that I went to about the Museum of Sound. People would record popular songs on wax cylinder.
Yeah.
Where it's like a record, but it's a tube.
Yeah.
Or like a music machine. And then they would go and stand in a park and charge you a penny to stand there and listen to it.
Yeah.
And then they'd play it and you'd listen to it and go, wow, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And then the next week they'd be back with something new. So there's no library or archive of any of this stuff because they'd just throw it away and then get a new one. There wasn't any sense that this stuff was going to hang around longer than this weekend. This is what everyone's listening to.
Would it even survive those wax
cylinders?
Yeah,
they're remarkably resilient. It's crazy. And when you hear like when we've saved recordings of like Louis Armstrong and all those early jazz guys, which is on wax cylinder or like aluminium acetate, you can hear how crunchy. I mean, the needle is a nail, you know, that you screw into your...
And isn't it that you could only use it once?
You could only play it 10 times before the record was destroyed and the needle was destroyed. I mean, it's crazy. I bought a little box of needles once and they are literally like nails.
Yeah.
So it kind of started there, but then there's a couple of pivotal sort of moments in production where something magical kind of happened. So 30s and 40s, it was very much kind of like you play and sing and we'll record it somehow and we'll disseminate it on record or acetate or whatever. Yeah. But then I think the main moment of enlightenment was Sam Phillips and Sun Records and the kind of Elvis, Johnny Cash type moment. Sam Phillips was famously maybe the first person to use the studio to create sound that wasn't necessarily what that band sounds like when they're playing the song. His gig was this slapback delay thing. And all of that early Elvis, all the Sun recording stuff, it's famous for this really close slap delay, which was a big time Sam Phillips sort of thing.
Yeah. He did Ike Turner as well, didn't he? He did the first, people say it's the first rock record.
Rocket 88.
Yes, which has that distorted sound.
I mean, Sam Phillips is so important. He probably by accident, but like, you know, there's that Sun Records, that early Elvis, that rock and roll sound is straight out of his... I'm sure he wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel, but this concept of the studio as an instrument, it seems to be that Sam Phillips in the 50s was the one where all the lights went on and sort of, if you had, same with the guys at Chess, the Chess brothers, the guys at Chess Records, if you want that sound, you've got to go to that guy. And that concept, I think, was fairly new and probably... Sam Phillips was the first guy to get that. If you want to sound like Elvis, you've got to go to that guy and you've got to go to that studio. Same with later on with Phil Spector. You've got to go to his studio in LA. That's the only way to get the sound. So maybe he's the first kind of superstar producer in a way in the 50s.
Yeah. But he was also doing other stuff as well. Like he was the kind of studio manager and the record label manager. And all of these. So that's where this kind of blurred lines starts between are they the manager, are they the producer, you know. I mean, quite a lot of the time they were all of those things. And I suppose they had a sort of engineer kind of person in the studio to sort of take care of the nitty gritty.
Well, when it became like a business,
Yeah.
and there's money to be made here, then recording studios became kind of like medical technological facilities,
Yeah.
and there would be like lab coats and guys who knew how, because the tapes, the tapes are made out of like glue and it's like a technical thing. It's also extraordinarily expensive to have this cutting edge futuristic tech in your studio. So after the 50s and early 60s, when it was very much just kind of like what's popular, let's make some of that, when it became like the bands with character, the kids want something to believe in type stuff, then you had suddenly you had less sort of a bunch of producers who became like the first round of like super producers. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
In the 60s, let's call that the golden age of producers.
So there's someone like George Martin is probably the kind of bridge between the old style lab coat
For
guy
sure.
and the super producers. Because George Martin, the other thing to throw
George
in is,
Martin, he produced the Beatles.
well, but he came up through radio, so he was producing all those things that were aired on the wireless, and that must have been quite a rich kind of pool of producer kind of people in radio, recording orchestras, recording
Goon Show,
all of that stuff. And George Martin was that guy. But then, in a way, it's quite cool that you have that the Beatles documentary, Get Back, because you see Glyn Johns in it.
Exactly.
And barely see George Martin. He's just sort of.
This is at the end of that moment, right? It's if you have a George Martin on the first Beatles EP where they famously did 6 tracks in a day, John blew his voice out. He was probably very much the kind of like press record, do your thing, good luck lads.
Yeah.
And then eventually it became kind of like, right, unlimited budget, unlimited tech. You can have any idea you want, hit me. And George Martin could also score a cello part if you need him to, or analyze a song and go, well, minor or major and stuff like that, knowledge.
Yes.
So he was quite exceptional, really. But because the Beatles were signed to a kind of comedy spoken word label, weren't they? Parlophone wasn't a record company. It was more like a kind of Goon Show, Peter Sellers. It was more like a kind of entertainment label.
And he worked for Parlophone.
He worked for them, yeah.
He was a jobbing.
But, this is part of producing in this period, 60s, is having a new technological world where there's no boundaries, nothing's been set yet, nothing's been done yet. So what can we do? And so the difference in music from 64 to 74, it's the arc of like, what can you do in this room? It's you've also got in this period Quincy Jones, who's bringing a kind of smoothness and again the ability to score and help artists be things that they're not naturally gifted at. They can ask, they can help.
Yeah.
And Quincy Jones was massive part of this. And you had Glyn Johns, who represents the kind of more kind of natural, what do you sound like? What do these drums actually sound like? What does the bass actually sound like?
Yeah.
And these guys, before we had bands that needed producers, producers would be almost like A&R guys.
Yeah.
They would find the record company would be like, hey, I got this band, they need some songs. And the producer would go down Tin Pan Alley or Denmark Street and go get them a bunch of songs and find a bass player. And I saw a lovely documentary recently, the Led Zeppelin documentary, and they were talking about how the bass player from Zepp would go to Denmark Street to get work as a bass player.
Yeah.
And you'd like go there on a Monday morning at 9 and there'd be 100 bass players, 100 piano players, 100 songwriters, and so the producers would go down there and pick their little teams for what they were doing at the time, which is really like the kind of and those producers probably didn't have any technical skill at all. They were just the guy going, I know what they want this, give me that.
Well, they were probably the Rick Rubins of their day. In a way.
Rick Rubins of their day, indeed.
Like without, So the other thing that kind of started happening around that time, late 60s, was when people decided they didn't need studios. So you have the kind of Connie Plank side of things.
Yeah, amazing. Connie Plank. I mean, that tapping right into the whole no Connie Plank, no sort of krautrock, no electronic revolution, And I mean, all those BBC Workshop sort of female composers who would
Derbyshire, yeah.
introducing populations to music they would never have consumed,
Yes,
like the
yes.
theme from Doctor Who or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
Where you're kind of listening to music, but you're not even sure that it's even music anymore because it's not made with an instrument you recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the producer, I guess in the 60s and 70s, the reason we know George Martin and Quincy Jones, and maybe Phil Spector, maybe not Glyn Johns so much, is because they kind of stepped out from behind the shadows and kind of went, yeah, they're a great band. Of course, I recorded them. That's why they sound so good, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And although George Martin didn't really work for that many other people, did he? Or did he?
No, he had very
He was like
comparatively
Nigel
little
Godrich, who was like
success.
kind of exclusive for a long time.
I mean, he didn't even do maybe as much as Nigel Godrich outside the Beatles. I think he kind of he put all his effort into setting up Air, the studio in London, and
Still
also
going,
the one
right?
but also the one in the Caribbean, which got destroyed by a hurricane or something, I think. But so he was doing that kind of thing. But what I love about this kind of era, the kind of late 60s, early 70s, is when you have these. You see the kind of next wave coming up, the engineers, people like Chris Thomas, who went on to be this giant producer at the end of the 70s and early 80s. But he was the kind of second engineer on some of the Beatles stuff, But also the name we talk about quite a lot, Gus Dudgeon.
Gus Dudgeon,
He was hanging out around that time and started doing comedy. And then he started doing Bowie because Bowie was, at that time, a bit comic. He was making this record for the record label, is it DRAM, I think.
Okay.
His first album was on DRAM. And it was like a comedy album. It was like kind of Peter Sellers. And it was Gus Dudgeon doing it. And they would just like raid the sound effects workshop at Decca.
Right.
Putting all this kind of random shit on there. And
Yeah.
that's what they used to do.
I mean, it's crazy because with Gus Dudgeon, we were making our latest record, and I was really into this Michael Chapman record, and we were wondering why it sounded so bloody great. And we checked the sleeve notes, and it was
Gus Dudgeon, yeah.
And he also worked with Bowie, and it was kind of like, God, of course he did. That actually sounds. I kind of get it. And Bowie, of course, he also did some production of his own. He also people wanted his magic sauce, and he brought some amazing things to some other artists as well.
So he must have been more the kind of conceptual, what is this sounding like producer. He probably wasn't the knob twiddling kind of
I don't
person.
know, because Glyn Johns famously, Glyn Johns he produced the Stones, the Who, the Eagles, Zeppelin, and famously absolutely hated Phil Spector, and the feeling was mutual. And anyone that's seen him in Get Back, you can see Glyn as kind of a bit of a crazy, young, trendy,
very
cool-looking
hip
guy.
yeah, totally.
And George Martin, it looks a bit like a bit of a third wheel in that documentary, a bit like, as in, you're done now, we're with this new guy, he's really crazy. He had his own way of recording drums, the Glyn Johns technique.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it in our world. It's like 4 microphones, and you put them here, and the drummer has to play into the mics rather than the mic capturing everything.
Yeah.
And so I think you go for a producer because of the sounds that they can help you make. And all of the, like Tony Visconti and Steve Albini and even Rick Rubin with System, especially if you're a drummer, if you're aware of producers, you must kind of go, I love the drums on this album. Who did it? Maybe we can use him.
Yeah.
You don't get a producer for each bit. You try and get a producer that's got, his snare sound is amazing on that Pixies album, and his guitar. Okay, let's try and get that guy.
Yeah.
That's the paradox. It's minutiae, but it's big picture at the same time. It's interesting.
Yeah.
There's an amazing bit in the Pink Floyd live in Pompeii. If you remember, have you guys seen that?
Yeah, back in the day.
Interspersed with studio footage from them recording Dark Side of the Moon, and there's a bit where they're in the cafeteria and they're bemoaning producers' lack of knowledge of the kit, because so what year was that? 1978 they'd have been recording that, 77. In the earliest of days, there probably wasn't that many choices of compressor to choose from.
Sure.
But as time progresses, and especially getting up to the modern era now, countless opportunities for people to and they love the kit exactly, and that's the thing in this scene. Roger Waters is saying, well, he's a great producer for his ears, but he doesn't know the first thing about the technology. It's just run away from him. So, and he's obviously a little irritated about that.
Yeah.
And he's saying, why are we having to explain to him how the kit works? He's the producer. He should know.
Yeah.
And it's a paradox that you have as, you know, the hands-on guys and the non-hands-on guys.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, producers often, especially in this time, in the 60s and 70s, where music was getting pushed to the boundaries in all directions of what is good and what isn't good, like George Martin's particularly, they would be presented with a problem and have to try and solve it while the band went off and got high and came back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think when they recorded Satisfaction or something for the Stones, they wanted this guitar sound quite specific, and they ended up gaffer taping cassette recorders to the walls of the rehearsal room and setting them all off at the same time and getting Keith to play it, so they got that crunchy sound. And when you listen to that song, you would never think, oh wow, surely he just plugged it in and turned the amp up and played it. But actually it was a whole process of how do we get this sound to sound so
It's an incredibly
crunchy.
weird sound, isn't it? It's unique. I've barely heard it on anything else.
And these producers, this was in the days of mono,
Right.
where you've only got one speaker. There's no moving sound around or couching sound or any kind of 3D. This is one speaker coming at you. In the really early days of mono, the producer would be literally the guy who would decide where to put the mic. So there's one mic, and it's going to cut straight to the record. So the singer, you stand there, and the drummer, you go over there, and because all the sound's going to come in one zone and come out one speaker. However, in the early 60s, some of that mono stuff, it sounds amazing. The limitation and how much only having mono squeezes everything down the same tube. It's a totally different production
And
idea.
conversely, it can also be a disaster. I've bought some old vinyls of blues guys and stuff where they're using that exact technique, and they've got it wildly wrong. Like literally, the vocal is deafeningly loud, and then you can't hear anything other than
that's
the
the
piano.
thing, exactly.
You can only slightly hear a bit of drums shuffling. Unfortunately, he's 4 feet too
it's
far
so
away.
true. When you hear all that old jazz stuff, it's drums and bass is kind of like literally the drums are like, and the bass is just like.
And the piano's ding ding bom ba-dee boo. Exactly.
You wonder how many times the producer would have had to tell the pianist, "Can you just play it a bit quieter, bro?" But so these super producers, I mean, you know, as a band, we know how much a difference a producer can make to the sound of a record. You come in with your songs and you all play the songs, and that's what you sound like. And a producer can really help you get out of your comfort zone a lot and move into these different spaces. And famously, they're very patient. And I think especially in the 60s and 70s, these guys must have had to be extremely patient. There's no mobile phones, there's no emails. The band, Mick's going to show up when he wants, Keith's going to roll in when he likes, but you've got to sit there all day, all night, no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
And be interested and invested and ready to go at all times.
Yeah, sure.
You can't necessarily have as much fun as the band.
I mean, that guy, Glyn Johns, he was in Get Back. He looked like he was doing something all the time. He was constantly moving things around, moving instruments, moving mics, moving this. But he always looked really cool. Yeah, he was like the coolest looking hip cat in the whole documentary, I thought.
Yeah. There's a famous story about Glyn and the Eagles from his biography, where the Eagles were desperate to get him to do the albums. The A&R guy, whoever, Geffen or whoever it was maybe it was even Geffen himself. It was like, we need you to do it. You're the guy for the job. You did the Stones and the blah blah blah, the Who and blah blah blah. We need you to do the Eagles. And he went to see him, and he couldn't stand him. He thought they were rubbish.
Right.
So, and then he went home again, and then the label's like, no, it's just a bad gig or whatever. You've got to come and see the next. They're much better now. Come and see the next one. Goes to LA, sees the gig again. He's like, nah, I don't like it. I don't get it. And then famously, he went to they had an after party in a bar, and the Eagles all went there and they sung a cappella.
Oh, yeah.
At this party, and then Glyn Johns was kind of like, ding, light bulb. Okay, that's what it's all about. I'm in as long as we can do it, kind of like that. And that Eagle sound is very much that kind of rainbow of vocals.
Right.
And famously, Glyn Johns was maybe one of the first producers who kind of doesn't like to interact with the record industry itself.
Right, okay.
So Hotel California is like the longest single ever released at that point or something. It was kind of like, and Zepp famously, no singles.
No singles at all.
All albums.
Same with Pink Floyd, right?
Yeah, so
pretty much.
It's kind of we've had the joy to work with a producer who was very much like, I don't want to talk to anyone from the music industry, and I kind of get that you don't want to be distorted by that.
They sort of all seem to be, actually. Now I cast my mind back, all producers seem to be quite hostile to the actual recording.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Bush was great. He just sat in the kind of corner of the room with one of his guitars, just twanging away, looking like a kind of, disgruntled
teenage wizard,
which was brilliant. But I mean, Flood will talk to the industry, but he won't like it. He won't have anything good to say about it.
Like I was thinking of Flood in terms of with the kit and to not kit, because there's a guy who you're paying for his ears as much as anything. His ears are amazing. There's an extra set of ears in the room.
Yeah.
He hears it in a different way to you guys, and he can that's what you're getting. But he definitely does know the kit inside out. And he avoids using any plugins because of the fact they're digital and a bit insincere. But do you remember his turn of phrase? I remember his turn of phrase to the engineers. He would say, "Put something on that." Do you remember? He would, wouldn't he? So he's not suggesting what. He's not saying put a compressor, put a distorter, put a de-esser, He just literally goes, "Put something on that." And John or Richie would have to sit there and go, "Okay, try and construe what he might mean from that," and then reluctantly activate a plugin. Put a tiny little hint of it on the flubbery to be yes or no.
Yeah. But you're right. He was very much a bit of a contradiction because he was a gearhead.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he liked doing the lead vocal take with a Beta 58 in the control room,
Sure.
as opposed to with a posh mic in the vocal booth.
Well, I mean, there's some people like live in the kind of history of producers. They kind of span like generational shifts. And between the 70s and 80s and 90s, there was a really big one. And something like that Joshua Tree album, produced by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. Eno to oversee it, Lanois because he's good with guitars, I guess. Yeah. And Flood was engineering it.
Sure.
So a young Flood learning the ropes. And then Steve Lillywhite was producing the singles.
Yeah.
So you got 4 absolute monsters of production history, all piling into Where the Streets Have No Name. Like, okay, this is going to be big. Kind of like Quincy, when he talks about Thriller, and he's talking about putting that album together. We're in the 80s now. He's saying we're going to attack this record. His famous quote, as in, I've got Jackson, I've got unlimited studio time. We're gonna attack this, best songs, best players, best everything. I think Thriller was one of the biggest albums in the 80s where the producer was front and center along with the artist. I remember seeing Jackson pick up a Grammy or something, and it was Quincy Jones was there as well. Who's that guy?
Yes,
that's Quincy,
right. Yeah, he did everything, but he wasn't ever credited as a songwriter. He didn't have a part in the songwriting. He got his top team of songwriters like Rod Temperton and so on. But he
there's so much arrangements on Thriller, like all those other instruments. That's got to be Quincy. And so that's the thing. So I guess we're in the history of producers. We've gone from bands that need someone to fulfill their potential and give them an interesting sonic, like Hendrix or the Stones or someone like that. And then post 70s, 80s, the digital thing started to creep in. Yeah. So it became much less lab coat and a lot more kind of how do we mix stuff together. Thriller's a great example of organic and digital. You don't really notice either. It's just done so well.
Yeah, seamlessly.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good time to cut to break. Yeah. After the break, we're going to go to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And we're going to go to the various council estates of the UK and feel a bit of that punk spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened when the industry lost control? No. Love that.
Great.
Good evening. It's going to be a good one, isn't it, tonight? I can feel it already.
After the global reputation of Wheels Turn Beneath My Feet comes finally the follow-up, Wheels 2. Contains 10 live cuts recorded between 2014 and 2019 in London, Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, and more. Includes some delicious versions of our biggest live tracks, including Resurgam, Pilgrim, Looking Too Closely, and an absolutely beautiful version of We Watch the Stars. Wheels Turn Beneath My Feet, Volume 2, new FINK live album. Stream everywhere now or buy on vinyl and CD from finkmusic.net or wherever you score your music.
Thank you.
Oh, isn't that nice? Well, you'd hope so. It's the new FINK record. Yay! It's called The City Is Coming to Erase It All. It sounds really intense, but it's actually really, really, really lovely. It's basically the three of us down in Zennor in Cornwall, getting all grounded and folky and acoustic, and it's really nice. Produced by our dear friend Sam Okell in his own spot. With our friends Charlie on strings and Martin on cello. Oh man, we just had a really deeply, intensely nice time, and hopefully that's reflected in some of these lovely, lovely tracks. The City Is Coming to Erase It All, album number 9 from FINK.
Window down, night air thick with the smell of the fields. And you memorize your senses, knowing that the city is coming to erase it all.
Welcome back after the break. We're going to do a real quick kind of brain teaser quiz now.
Okay.
Just to bring us back into the mood.
Jarring us back into reality.
Real quick. I'm gonna mention the name of a person, and you have to tell me whether they produced records for anyone other than themselves.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Love that, Mr. T.
Okay.
Go
To
on.
my knowledge, I mean,
And caveat, none of us are experts in any of the stuff.
Yeah.
We can barely play our own music.
Yes.
So don't,
All right.
this isn't,
That's
yeah.
cool. All right. Frank Zappa.
Definitely has. He definitely
No, I
produced.
don't think he did.
Timmy?
He did,
Yeah.
but very, very not very often.
But he did though,
produced
right?
Captain
a
Beefheart.
band called the GTOs and the album Permanent Damage. I discovered.
There you go. I
Never
had no
heard it.
idea.
Well, I did hear it actually. It was kind of crazy.
I bet it bloody was.
But did he do Beefheart? You think?
No, he probably not. But if you were going to make me guess, I would have said, "Oh, maybe he produced Beefheart."
Yeah, I
but
would have
no,
thought that too.
I didn't. Yeah, but no, I didn't know.
Okay.
David
good.
Byrne.
Did David Byrne produce Talking Heads?
Well, with Brian Eno on some of the stuff. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say yes. I think he might have produced some David Sylvian guitar work.
Well, yeah, he has. He has definitely. I don't know if he's done that, but he did the Fun Boy 3 album. With,
Oh,
There you, of
right.
course, naturally,
Well,
of course.
yes. Next.
Which actually, when you listen to it, when you hear that song, "Our Lips Are Sealed," it sounds like Talking Heads.
We're going to just, me and
In a
Guy
way.
are just going to have to take your word for that.
Yeah,
you know
Because
that.
our Fun Boy
We're not
3 knowledge is
fact-checking any of this.
Okay.
slim.
Andy Warhol.
You mean Andy Warhol, the artist?
Yes.
Is he also a musician?
Well-
He produced one of the greatest albums ever made.
Velvet Underground. Is
Yeah,
that him?
he
Is that him?
produced the Banana. What was it called? It's called Andy
Velvet
Warhol.
Underground,
Huh?
Velvet Underground, and Nico.
That's
Oh, well, there
right.
you go. So yes, he produced Velvet Underground.
He did.
Very
I mean,
good,
and
yes.
you know, it really annoys me that he could be Andy Warhol and end up producing
I know,
one of the
I know.
greatest
I know, and
records
just
ever
do
made.
that.
It's almost like he produced. Is it Venus in Furs? He produced that.
What's he gonna
It's
do next?
unbelievable
I know,
that he
I
did
know,
that.
I know.
That's
it's
that's
insane.
too much talent. I mean, what next? He's going to create like
Too
a new kind
much
of brioche or something. Just like no one can compete with this.
All right. Madonna.
No.
I'm going to say no as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't find anything by her. Simon Le Bon.
I met Simon Le Bon.
Did you?
Really
Well,
cool
we
guy.
were
by all
we were in
accounts.
Flood Studio.
Oh, yes.
We
you
were at
did.
Salt and
That's
Battery,
right,
and he was on the
yeah.
couch, and I was on the couch, and he imparted some knowledge to me.
Okay.
He imparted the knowledge that When you're on a diet, it's great to eat nuts because the body uses every bit that it needs to and gets rid of all the bits that it doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
That's from
Okay.
that's from
From
the Le
Simon
Bon.
Le Bon. Wow.
I think he probably has. Yeah.
I'm going to say no. I don't think he has.
I'm going to say yes because he was such a gregarious,
He is a
awesome
gregarious
dude.
type, but apparently he's never produced any.
Oh,
anyone else.
brilliant!
your
Once
face,
again, Tim
guy.
goads me into an intellectual trap.
And this is a trick question.
I
Final
thought
one.
the last one was.
Steve Albini,
Well, of course,
because
he's
his
produced-
band was
Big Black.
He's produced loads of other bands.
Yeah, but what's
Why is it a
what's the
trick
catch
question?
with
the
Steve
catch is that
Albini?
he's never produced his own record.
No, the catch is he refuses to let himself be credited as a producer. He always says and recorded by.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, he says the term producer is bullshit. I don't think I should be ever described as a producer.
I like that. Well done.
So
Mr.
is he
T.
more of a hands-on kind of guy? So he'd be more engineering,
Incredibly,
yeah? Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for that quiz.
Yeah.
What do we win?
Yeah. Once
Keep
again,
asking.
A week in Tim's studio.
You mean my continued participation in
I'm
this?
just consistent defeats at this point, so I'm not interested
You did
in
good.
winning.
You said yes to David Byrne, and you were correct.
Oh, thanks, Mr. T. That
Yeah,
one
see,
slim silver lining
In
of
Tim's rainbow-painted playground, everyone
exactly.
gets a medal,
Everybody
bro.
wins, guy.
So what we were going to spin back, weren't we? We were going to pivot back.
We
to-
were. Before the break, we were in this kind of period of time where you had like Phil Spector using 5 grand pianos and 6 drummers, and producers getting orchestras in to do a couple of bits, and the absolutely massive bloated productions, and it's all getting a bit out of hand.
Yeah.
Some would argue. And then we had 2 things happen. Paraphrasing a decade of creativity here, but a couple of things happened that were the total antithesis of the bloated prog rock, Emerson, Lake and Palmer type direction that everyone seemed to be going in. In our experience, anyway, we split them into what happened in Jamaica in the 70s and what happened in the various council estates of the UK
That's right.
in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the kind of birth of DIY, basically.
Yeah.
And the Jamaican production story, like, don't get me started. I learnt to produce from listening to Scratch Perry records and King Tubby records.
Right.
Because these guys would be on the mixing desk actively muting channels during the mix to get rid of the horns, put a delay on this, put a delay on that. And as a young producer, I would be listening to these records and I would be learning, oh, right, the backing vocals aren't on the same channel as the lead vocals because he just muted the backing vocals there.
Yeah.
Or, right, the delay isn't on the kick drum. It's only on the snare, which means the snare must be on a different channel to the kick. And it was like listening to a lecture in, this is how you spread your stuff out on a mixing desk. This is what's separate. I learned everything from listening to King to Tubby and Scratch Perry records. You don't learn the genius that created that music because these producers were very active in getting the band to do something they wanted to do, knowing they were going to absolutely manipulate that into something else.
Yeah.
But, Jamaica in the 70s was not a place where you had access to fancy studios and loads of equipment. Anyone that's ever been to Jamaica knows if you bring any electronic equipment on that island, it's going to be dead in a couple of years. It's hot, it's steamy, it's wet. Producers like Scratch Perry and King Tubby and Channel One and Tuff Gong and all these great studios, they must have been very hot, sweaty, dusty, smoky spots.
Yeah.
Not the kind of pristine Columbia Records, New York recording studios at all.
Yeah.
And these guys were making music that was changing what we thought music actually was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reggae was such a genre-specific thing with its own rule book, but these producers would be getting a particular sound out of the musicians and the pieces they were recording, and then they were manipulating them to make them dub, creating the kind of environment so that you would have MCs and toasters rapping over the top of these dubs at the dances, and unquestionably in the DNA of all of hip-hop culture.
Yeah.
You'd have this concept of the remix. These dub producers would take a classic and then do a dub, which is the first version of a remix. So creating the remix, which dance music, lent on really heavily.
Yeah.
Chris Blackwell famously goes down there and, records Marley
in a shed, did you say? Yeah.
I've studied Bob Marley's records so much, and I've always been trying to work out which compressor did Chris Blackwell use on the kick drum and stuff like that. And I know from talking to lots of people, it was the band.
Right.
It's not Chris Blackwell's genius use of a limiter or a double compressor or whatever. It's the bass player just plays the bass like that.
Right.
And the drummer just plays the drums like that. And if you put a mic in front of him, it sounds like,
sounds like that.
How great is that?
Wow, yeah.
So this idea caused such a ruckus in the music business because A, they had no control over it.
Yeah.
B, who are these people? And C, it seemingly costs so little to make that next week they're already making the next record, and then a couple of weeks later there'll be another record. Yeah. And the sheer volume of being able to make records, the Jamaican pressing plants would be recycling vinyl.
Yeah,
they'd take old vinyl and melt it and do it again. And I've got some of these records; they are crunchy.
Yeah,
but these guys are producing without any knowledge of how to do it, and sometimes that is amazing because you get the results that you weren't expecting. Because Lee Scratch Perry has got absolutely no training in any of this stuff. He famously worked on so he says, on a construction site, and when they'd be hitting rocks with hammers, he'd be hearing music coming from the rocks.
Right.
And then he would then be thinking about that, and he was bringing that into his music. And
that's cool.
You know, it was actually a massive advantage to not know how any of this gear works.
Yeah.
Because then you learn how to use it to do what you want it to do, without knowing that that's totally wrong.
Yeah, sure.
You shouldn't tweak that button. It goes, you know, you don't want that. And you go, well, actually, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning at a big dance, that sounds amazing. You should try it.
Yeah.
And so the Jamaican producers who are very much like, I need that guy, or I need that guy to produce my record, very, very much a sound. Mm-hmm. They were so out of the industry loop. That it makes their music very pure. It's a very pure expression of what they were doing.
It's funny that there's always been a big link between reggae and punk.
Well, tell us more about punk.
Well, I'm going to say, because the thing is that this is just a slight aside, but I've read Viv Albertine's book recently, and she talks about the fact that in the early days of punk, there weren't any punk records yet. So if the punks went to a club, they couldn't dance to punk records because they didn't exist. But what did exist was reggae records. So that's why the punks all got into. You had people like Don Letts playing reggae records, because they actually did exist. And then people started making, obviously. But the thing with making punk records is that quite a lot of the time they were made using these producers who'd had training in the early years, like with the people like the Beatles. So you had Chris Thomas, you know, who's made lots of punk records, produced Never Mind the Bollocks, Sex Pistols. And it is, yes, it's a punk album, but it's also a very kind of well-produced album. I mean, it sounds like a very kind of slick rock record if you listen to it.
It does.
Apart from Johnny Rotten's vocals, which are just as like solid and
amazing,
sort of, you know. But then you also get people like Nick Lowe, who definitely... He did New Rose by the Damned, which I think was the first ever punk single to be released. And that sounds crunchy as hell. I mean, he must have, he must have just thought, I've got to make this exactly how it sounds, because that's the only way to make this.
Well, this is the thing about punk, isn't it? The whole point of punk, and why the punks got into reggae and vice versa was this fact that it's subversive, it's fighting the system. There's loads of fight the system messaging in here.
Yeah.
It's pro drugs, it's anti-system. It's like, well, what's not to like here, you know?
Yeah.
And with the punks, if you listen to like John Peel's famous punk show, where he which is the kind of flag in the sand of like, well, punk exists now.
Yeah.
Loads of those bands, it's demos. It's like cassettes recorded in garages.
Yeah.
And the big punk bands that we know of, obviously, they then hit the industry. The industry's like, we got to sign you because you're great. Go in that studio, and then you get. Often, you know, you'd wish to see that band in a bar. It would have sounded very different from what they sounded like on record. That's a culture clash, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the punks were definitely kind of anti everything, including the whole marketplace of the music business. As in, we're going to have our own magazines, our own record labels, our own pressing. We're going to use pressing plants in a different way.
Yeah.
We're gonna like make it all ourselves because anyone else who touches this is going to ruin it with their touch.
Yeah.
So it's going to be all ours. In a very, very political way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think the producers were very like a lot of the music industry was totally blindsided by this. How do you monetize this?
Yeah.
You just can't.
No,
I mean,
sure.
they did, of course. You know, the fact that it's, you know, it's fight the system, including you. I think it really was like a kind of bleaching moment in the music business and for the music itself.
Definitely.
It's almost like pre-punk, post-punk.
Yeah. But then into that kind of area comes, I think, two different types of creativity. You have the really bonkers creativity of Martin Hannett, who does Joy Division and goes on to do, I think he produced New Order as well.
Right.
But he was kind of channeling that in the kind of, how can I make the most imaginative, innovative music possible and, you know, make it. And he really, I mean,
had the same punk spirit as the bands he was working with.
Yes,
right?
exactly, yeah. But he really did kind of create that sort of Joy Division sound, I think, you know, because without him, the drums would not have sounded like that, for example.
Yeah.
But then you have the other side of people who were sort of saying, how can we make this slickness and how can we make this kind of... So I'm thinking of people like Hugh Padgham, who went on to make that drum sound that you get in the Phil Collins records.
Right.
And Peter Gabriel and XTC. So... And that was probably, those twin areas were what ended up making the 80s sound like it did.
Right.
You know, because you had this sort of the slick side and then the kind of really creative, crazy side.
I mean, that was the thing. Originally, when it was when the technology coming in and the digital nature coming in, it was on the smooth side.
Yeah.
And the rough, edgy stuff was coming from the human element. But eventually that would then cross over again and go the other way.
Yeah, for
But,
sure.
you know, with punk, a lot of the bands would produce themselves.
Yeah.
And with a lot of punk bands from those really obscure sevens that now cost 900 quid on Discogs, the producer was just whoever pressed record on the tape machine when they did when they put the take down. Obviously, when it comes to the legal side of what producers do, it's quite complex. Giving someone a master share of the artist's profits across a blah 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 blah. I mean, I'm already half asleep, and it is like really complex. To apply that to reggae or punk is like, oh my god, who owns what here? I mean, even with Scratch Perry, some of his great records like Super Ape, which I've the first thing I used AI to research last year. You know, he's just remixing other people's material. So is he even the artist here?
Right.
It's again the producers kind of playing with the concept of what is music and what am I doing?
Yeah.
It's like, well, with the reggae guys, Chris Blackwell is more of a classic. I found some talent. I want to record it. You guys are great. I've got a few ideas of what to add to make this crossover a bit more. So with Bob Marley, the early stuff is very island. Yeah. And then when Bob Marley was bigger, he decided to get a bunch of American guys to session over the top to give us those kind of guitar sounds and a few solos to make it travel, which, you know what? It did.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very much the bad guy in Jamaican music in a way.
Is he
now?
really?
Yeah, they call him Chris Whitewell or whatever. But he did help. His production ideas did help cross the Wailers over, I think, for sure.
Because they were huge. I mean, they were unprecedentedly huge, the Bob Marley and the Wailers.
But because the music is so incredible that it almost encapsulates an entire country's vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so rare. It's
sure.
It's almost bigger than the Stones Paint It Black and you see like American attack helicopters in Vietnam and you go, okay, song, moment, get it.
Yeah.
Bob Marley should be on the money in Jamaica.
Yeah,
I mean, he practically is when you land at the airport and it's literally like, you know, when you go to Brazil and Rio, it's basically just Christ the Redeemer in every form you can possibly want to buy. In Jamaica, it's like it's basically like it should be called the Bob Marley Airport. He's so important. The music's so important. Also, his story.
Sure.
This story, and I think Chris Blackwell did great to just get out of the way of all of that and just make sure it sounds so great. So great. Yeah. And so the producer can often really help an artist that's pretty rough around the edges, as Marley and the Wailers were, for sure, and help them get where they're going.
Yeah.
And often, which is quite, if this was like a biopic from the last podcast, this is often where the producers get kind of forgotten or discarded, or he didn't really do much, it's all about me.
Sure.
And sometimes bands can like actually forget that, well, remember what you sounded like before you met that guy.
Yeah,
He's actually the fifth member of your band.
Sure.
Or the secret sauce.
Yes.
Or your secret weapon.
Yeah.
And if you move away from that, well, you're risking losing the thing that makes you great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, as we'll see in the next episode, this will be one of the most interesting decades, the next one, because it's the birth of hip-hop and it's dance music. Then it's incredibly slick 80s pop as well, and how the producer kind of has an effect on all of that.
Before we go,
I
hand over to the next podcast, there's one feature that we haven't done yet.
Oh, yeah?
Lucie's got a question, it's random. Lucie's got a question, it's random.
She managed to do just
There's
one.
three. Lucie, we should let people know, obviously, who don't know already. Lucie is she helps us make things happen, doesn't she? She really does.
Yeah.
Right.
Question number 1: which producer would you be most scared of playing in front of?
Oh,
Flood was pretty scary, I got to
Flood,
say, wasn't
yeah.
it? First
Scary,
time.
Flood again.
I'm going to say Rick Rubin, because you just think he's done everyone from Beasties to System of a Down, and even the James Blakes and Adeles of this world. I'd be pretty intimidated by him.
I'm going to say Michael Beinhorn.
I don't even know who's
Michael
that.
Beinhorn. He produced, among others, Soundgarden's Super Unknown, and he produced Celebrity Skin by Hole. And he is incredible producer, but no one has worked with him twice.
Ooh.
Because he's such a fucking badass.
Cool.
And he does some controversial things, like secretly replacing the drummer with a session drummer and like not telling them, and
Goodness
all
me.
those sorts of things. But he seems like a kind of person that I'd be like, oh fuck, I don't think I can play anymore, kind of thing.
Oh, you mean as a drummer, you wouldn't want to drum in front of him?
Sure, or all of it.
Because you'd be like, I'm going to be replaced.
yeah.
All right, I'm going to go with you next time we do a sideshow record. No,
Oh, me.
No, not that note. Why are you so stoned? Stop doing that. Nah, and
We made a great record, though,
We'll
dude.
make, and we will again.
And we will again.
We will again.
So me, is that your genuine
Yes.
answer? Me.
Amazing.
Thank you, Lucie, for that. Next question. Which producer would you just like to hang out with? Which one would you not want to hang out with? That's two questions,
Well,
technically.
it's going to have to be you again on that.
Nice, yeah, on both counts.
Which producer you'd just like to hang out with? I mean, I'd love to hang out a bit more with Flood.
Yeah,
actually.
Flood was
Don't
fun.
necessarily want to work with him again, but
And Billy Bush.
There are mates who would be nice to see them.
Yeah.
I would love to hang out with Jack Antonoff for a second, just to pick his brains and be like, are you that genius guy that makes pop diamonds, or are you just randomly the right guy in the right place?
Yeah.
Lucky you, good for you type thing. Or maybe Paul Epworth, because some of the work that Paul Epworth did before he was Mr. Adele was really creative.
Yeah, definitely.
Like he was like
Maximo Park.
Dan Carey before Dan Carey, very creative, very interesting stuff.
Yeah,
so maybe
definitely.
a bit of Paul Epworth as well.
Sure.
Or a bit of David Guetta, because he'll have a nice yacht.
I'm not sure about who I wouldn't like to hang out with.
Yeah, that's a bit of a harsh question.
Well,
I
yeah,
think.
so
we
what-
might gloss over that.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
a bit
gloss
mean.
over
It's a
that
bit
because
mean.
we
I
like
would quite
everyone.
like to hang out with Aphex Twin.
Oh, yeah?
A, just because no one produces anything like that, and B, I reckon it would be completely bonkers to spend an afternoon with.
Well, I mean, that's a great answer in so many ways, because here we are in Cornwall. He is Cornwall's highest selling recording artist.
Rightly
He's
so.
one of the greatest producers
Amazing.
of the 20th century.
Yeah, incredible. Redefined how dance music can sound.
And that's what we'll be covering in the next episode.
Very good.
Love that guy. You're like podcast gold, bro. You're link
You're the
gold.
segue king. Amazing.
See you next
All right,
time.
see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.